So thank you, everybody, for being here this evening. I'm really excited to be back in Athens. It's been probably 3 or 4 years since I was last here. And as always, as you live in such a special place, and so it's exciting to be back in the... Okay, we'll use this one. Okay. You ready? Okay. Okay, I'm just really happy to be here. So thank you all for joining us tonight. Thank you to the sponsors who are helping to make this event possible. Thank you to all of you who are so actively engaged in your chapter. This is really a great group of people, and as you know, you're a very strong team here in the Hellenic chapter, and we appreciate that very much at ASHRAE. So what I'm going to talk to you this evening is give you the overview of this year's society theme, which is building our new energy future. Just as a reminder, every president has a society theme where during the year they use this as a way to help talk about the goals that ASHRAE is having to move our society forward, to continue to be a leader in our industry, and to help us as leaders in the society have a vision to help direct the way that we spend our resources, whether that's our time, our volunteer time, and our money, to help all of us as ASHRAE members and members of the buildings industry be ready for what's coming next, for what we think the ASHRAE is going to be doing to serve our industry moving forward. So this year's society theme is building our new energy future. And it's focusing on how the changes that we are seeing in the energy sector, where we get the energy needed for the buildings that we are responsible for creating built environments that are healthy and productive and well for the occupants. So all those changes that are happening on the other side of the meter are starting to have an impact on us. And so this year's theme is to think about what are those impacts, what is it that we anticipate these changes to be, and what is ASHRAE doing to help all of us be ready as we move into this new energy future. I'm particularly going to be focusing on the power sector. I know we could look at both the electrical side as well as the thermal side, but for tonight's presentation, I'm going to look at the power sector, because we are seeing major changes that are occurring right now, and the resources we're using to generate electricity, and how that electricity is being moved around between places where it's generated and places where it's being used. Other technologies that are entering the buildings market that are allowing us to use that resource, that electrical energy, in ways we've not had the opportunity to do so in the past. All of these things are happening right now, and it means big changes for us. So that's what we're going to be focusing on tonight. But to get ready for those changes, there are 3 things that all of us need to do. We need to become aware. We need to get engaged of what these changes are and what are the opportunities that they bring to us in the buildings industry. And most importantly, we need to start now. We need to start to incorporate the new solutions that we can identify today in the work that we are doing, so that when we are having the opportunity with ideas and strategies and things that are coming our way, we will be ready to incorporate them into the work that we do. So tonight I'm going to tell you about what ASHRAE is doing to help us as an organization become aware of what's coming our way, to help us become engaged in this new conversation, and what ASHRAE is also doing in order to start right now to help us build the technical knowledge we need to continue to be leaders in the buildings industry as this new energy future becomes a reality. I'll also talk about what you can do to become aware, get engaged, and start now. So let's start with the become aware part. ASHRAE is doing a number of things, and some of these things we've started, or that we have started already, have resulted in some products. The first I'd like to tell you about is this primer. It's called Building Our New Energy Future. You can see it's not very big, but what this does is it lays out what are the changes that are occurring in the power sector. What does this mean to buildings? What does it mean to us? It's intended to provide all of us with a common language. So when we're talking about things like smart grid systems and microgrid systems and grid integrated buildings and how do we integrate across sectors between buildings and the other sectors, what does it mean to be a provider of energy services? All of these terms that we're starting to hear in the buildings industry, we try to lay them out and describe what do they mean in this document right here. So the purpose of it is to help us build that baseline knowledge that we all have in common so that we can understand what it is that's going on. We can talk about it when we have a similar knowledge, when we're talking to each other, and when we're talking to our own stakeholders and we're explaining these changes to them, we're explaining it in similar ways. So this document is free for download. You can get it from the ASHRAE.org website. So down here, go to ASHRAE.org. Across the top of the screen, when you go there, you'll see an About tab as one of your options. Click the About tab and then select the ASHRAE President's webpage. And from that, there'll be a link near the top of the page that takes you to this document. So please download it and read it. I pointed out that it's not an overwhelming amount of stuff to read. I think you'll find it really interesting. I think what you'll also find it useful is not only to help yourself become aware, but it's a good tool to use when you are being asked by your own stakeholders about some of these questions and some of these issues. And you can point them to this to help them become aware also. So it's a really good tool that ASHRAE developed and released in about June of last summer. So it's only about 9 months old, and I think you'll find it very helpful. ASHRAE is also helping to become aware in some other ways. One of them is to expand our distinguished lecture program to include more presentation topics on things that are related to this year's theme. So presentation topics on things such as these new presentations that are listed on this slide here. So if you're interested in having an opportunity to meet with the experts that are able to talk in great detail about these topics here, please work with your chapter leaders and invite them to ask to invite these DL speakers to your future chapter events. Because these are the people that can answer your detailed questions and can help you understand how do you incorporate these concepts into the work that you're doing based on their experience. If you do invite them to your chapter, help others become aware too. Get them in front of policymakers or people in other industries that you expect you'll be working with as we become a more integrated systems between buildings and other systems. Or get them in front of students and help students become aware of these issues so that we can help build that interest that they will want to pursue throughout their careers, and they can become our new leaders as we're moving into this new energy future. So this is some ways that you can use these experts to help build awareness in your own community. What we've done is we've asked our existing distinguished lecturers who have some expertise in this area to expand their own portfolio of presentations to include new presentations on these topics. And we're also recruiting for new distinguished lecturers to join the program from that have expertise in this area that we feel could augment the portfolio of presentations already available. So keep your eyes out for more presentations to come. If any of these look interesting to you, you might consider inviting them to a future chapter event. So why is this important to think about? Well, I'd like to draw your attention to this number that's in the upper right corner of the slide. In most parts of the world, buildings consume the majority of the electricity that's generated. Usually it's about 3/4 of all of the electricity that's generated is consumed by the built environment. That's a really big number. And a lot of us don't even realize that as a sector, how much of that electrical energy our sector is consuming. When I look at this number, I think of two things. I think of, first of all, this is a wake-up call to me to realize that what we do every day is contributing to using most of that electricity that's generated. That means that the decisions that we make in our daily lives as we are doing our part in the buildings industry is impacting the amount of energy that our buildings consume. When we look at it, it's 3/4 of all the electricity that's generated. We have some responsibility to to manage that energy in ways that we've not thought about before. The other thing that it tells me is, as we are seeing some evolutionary changes on the power sector side of things, that it won't be long before those changes are going to be impacting us on our side of the meter. We are the #1 customer for the power sector. We consume almost 3/4 of all the power that they generated. We are their primary market for the product that they're selling. So if they're experiencing an evolutionary change, it will impact us. And we need to be ready for that change. And we need to look at it as an opportunity for how we can do things differently and better. And if we start thinking about it in that way now, we will be prepared when it will become a reality and we have no choice but to adapt to the changes that are occurring. So when most people think of the power sector, this is what they think of. They in their minds have the infrastructure where you have electrons running through the wires. It's a really good thing. It's been around for about 100 years, and it's given us access to energy like we haven't before ever had up until about 100 years ago. And so as you can see from this quote, it is considered to be one of the greatest achievements of the 20th century. Generally, this is how it works. We produce power in large quantities in a centralized power plant. Usually fuels that are used at that plant are fossil fuels. Coal is still used extensively, although that share is getting smaller. Natural gas is getting larger. We have nuclear energy in the mix. And then we have some renewables thrown in there as well. Centralized power production, all those electrons are sent through infrastructure such as the high voltage lines you see in this picture here to the load. And now we all know that that load, 3/4 of it is us, is the buildings industry. Most people don't even know where their power plant is. They just worry about, do I have it at the meter? Do I have enough of it? Can I use it as I need it? Those of us in our industry, we design buildings, we do the right thing in buildings so that they're creating environments that are right for the occupants of those buildings, and we don't really think about what's happening on the other side of the meter. But we are seeing changes on the other side of the meter. We're seeing much more distributed generation. As that piece of the picture where we have the renewables contribution to the amount of electricity that's being generated, as that piece gets bigger, what's happening is we're having more and more distributed generation that's tied into that infrastructure that moves electrons around. We are having the opportunity to connect loads, whether it's energy-consuming devices within buildings or between buildings, with those devices with on-site distributed generation. So we're having information exchange in ways we've never had the opportunity to do before, resulting in bidirectional flow of that electricity. So instead of just going from where it's generated to where it's used, it's moving in all sorts of directions on that infrastructure. We're seeing new technologies like storage that is maturing very rapidly. Storage is already something that large power producers, the utility companies, are investing in it as a way to help levelize the reserves between what they're generating and what the loads are, to ensure that they have consistently enough power available to meet the loads no matter what that load profile is. They're already investing in it, so that means it won't be long before that storage technology will become something that those of us in the buildings industry will have access to, and will be able to access it at a price that is competitive with the other solutions we're considering for a building. We have other loads that are coming online that we've never seen before. For example, as we electrify with the transportation sector, all of those vehicles, we're seeing more and more of them coming out and work on our roadways. They have to plug in and charge somewhere. And in most cases, where they plug in is on the building side of the meter. So now in buildings, we either have an unregulated plug load that requires a lot of power, or potentially, do we have a mobile storage device that we can tap into to meet our building's needs? These are some of the examples of the things that are happening on the other side of the meter that are or will be impacting us very soon. The power sector has already moved into the 21st century. We, as buildings professionals, we need to have our thinking moving into that 21st century as well. We need to move beyond where we think of our engineering problem as the walls of the building and recognize that the building is a resource, an opportunity to interact with these other things that are happening in ways that can help us do our jobs better, as well as contribute to other challenges that are occurring on the other side of the meter. So this is what we are really focusing on this year to help ASHRAE and its members build our awareness of what these changes are, what those opportunities are that are coming our way, to get ready to find solutions and to begin implementing of those solutions so that all of us can continue to be leaders in the buildings industry as we are experiencing this evolution. So what are some of the things that ASHRAE is doing to build awareness in addition to the primer? Remember, go to ASHRAE.org, the About page, and then ASHRAE's President's webpage, and you can download it. I told you about the Distinguished Lecture Program and how we're expanding that to include more presentation topics on these types of questions. But something else that we're working on too is we are developing an application guide for smart grid systems in buildings. This is a guide that will help all engineers be able to understand the range of things, from what does it mean to have a smart grid system in the building, how do I make a building ready to have smart grids incorporated into the building systems overall, how do I actually do it when you have the equipment available that you can implement it right now. This will be for both retrofit projects and new construction projects. So we have begun working on this application guide. I exchanged emails with the chair of the committee that's overseeing the development of this guide just a couple weeks ago, and learned that they are expecting it to be ready to be published in the middle of this summer. So watch your favorite way of receiving information from ASHRAE and look for announcements about this application guide when it's published. And I hope you find it useful in your own work that you're doing. We're doing some more too. One of the things we have lined up is to offer a webinar on topics about efficient buildings and the future of a more intelligent grid. In other words, the grid interactive buildings, having buildings being supporting the reliability and the resiliency of the grid system, to incorporate buildings into microgrid systems where you have the buildings communicating loads with one another, as well as communicating with on-site generation that is supporting the power needs for a group of buildings. These are the types of things that we'll be covering in this webinar. So we have the speakers lined up, and we're right now looking for a date to offer it. Again, watch your favorite way of receiving information from ASHRAE, and we will announce the date of this webinar as soon as we're able to get it scheduled with all of our speakers. If you're not able to participate in it when it's offered, it will be recorded, and you can download it and watch it at your own convenience at a later time. We also have these short Q&A videos. The 3 topics are listed here. These are just 1.5 to 2 minute videos that give a quick introduction to each of these 3 topics. This is a really good way for you just to take a couple minutes to review what does it mean to have a grid interactive building, or to looking at smart home systems and that sort of thing. Really fast. But this is also a tool that you can use to help your stakeholders become more aware as well. So when they start asking you questions, or if you feel like that they would be interested in this so that you could encourage them to ask questions, you might point them to these really short videos to help generate some ideas and help pique their curiosity. You can access these by going to ASHRAE.org, hit the About button, and then go down to the ASHRAE President's webpage again, and there are links to those videos from that webpage. You could also just go to YouTube, do a search for ASHRAE, and they'll come up that way too. So whatever is easiest for you to find. But please visit these videos and share them with others that you think would be interested in seeing them. So these are some of the things that ASHRAE is doing to build awareness, to help ASHRAE as an organization. We want ourselves to become more aware, but through that process, we're developing tools to help all of you and others in the buildings industry to help build your awareness also. So take advantage of them. Look at the primer, the videos, the webinar, on all the things that I've talked about. But there's more that you can do. You can talk to one another. There are people in this room that have some experience in this area already. Find out who they are, ask questions. perhaps invite them to be, to share their knowledge at one of your chapter events moving forward, so that more of you can become aware based on what your own colleagues may already know. Reach out across the boundaries of the buildings industry and start to become aware about thoughts from other sectors, from your colleagues in other sectors, and what they have, and what they're thinking about as far as what these changes are and how the buildings community will play a role in these changes. So if you know somebody on the power side, if you know somebody with the utility, start asking them questions, see what they have to say. I'm finding that when I talk to utility folks and say, what's going on, what do you see from your utility viewpoint, what are the changes that are coming, I can say 100% of the time, the response has been that buildings are going to be playing an important role in how buildings, or how the utility sector is going to make sure that they are able to provide a resilient and reliable system moving forward. That they depend on us, they recognize that the building sectors is their primary customer, that they see that they've done everything they can on their side of the meter, and then that to meet the goals that they have to provide the energy resource that all of us want. And the next step is that they need to be able to interact more dynamically with the building sector. Power sector sees that already. And I'm sure you'll be interested if you start talking to your own colleagues in that area to hear how they're describing that change. These are some of the things that you can do to build your awareness in addition to the tools that ASHRAE is providing. So please think about how you can build your awareness and to become smarter about just what's going on. So I have mentioned a couple times how the utility side, the power sector, sees opportunities in becoming more integrated with the buildings. Instead of just selling us their electrons, they want to be a part of that, of how those electrons are being used. That's one example about how industries outside of the building sector are seeing opportunities in our world, and they're beginning to mobilize to take advantage of those opportunities. So for example, let me give you another sector as an example. We have the tech sector, the group of industries that are really good at collecting information, analyzing that information, using that analysis to make decisions and to make changes based on what they've learned. One of the examples I'd like to give is it's very easy now to go to a home improvement store and buy a really cool looking thermostat that you can hang on your wall and connect to your home heating and air conditioning systems. And from that you can take your device, and from anywhere in the world you can turn on and turn off your air conditioning, your heating systems, depending on what else you might be connecting to your smart home system. You might be able to turn on your home security system. You might be able to turn lights on in the house if you want to turn on the porch lights at a certain time of day, or if you want to maybe even have some access to appliances if you have smart appliances, like turn the coffee on without even having to get out of bed in the morning. We are now having the opportunity to begin to have smart home systems simply from that thermostat that we can purchase and put on the wall. And these products are, the market for them is growing very rapidly because people want to have it. It's giving them opportunities to interact with their built environment like they've never had before. They're having information about their own spaces like they've never had access to before. And they look good on the wall too. And so people want it because it looks good and it's really fun to play with, and they like to show it to their friends, and there's this whole market that's been developed. Now, the companies that are creating those products and introducing them to the market, they see a whole market of people that can buy their product. They're not necessarily creating them with any kind of buildings expertise or with any intention of improving the built environment through the product. Yes, it's a possibility that it can be done, but that's not the main motivator for putting those products out on the market. So that's an example about how we have a different industry who sees an opportunity in our industry and they're mobilized to take advantage of it. So if we are having these other industries like the tech sector or the power sector that recognize that their future includes us, that if they start to act now, that they will be able to create markets, they'll be able to influence how we do things in the built environment, and they're taking action now. It won't be long before these outside industries, outside of the buildings industry, are going to begin to set the new ground rules for how do you play in this space. So if you think about it, who would we rather have creating the protocols, the guidelines, the standards on things like indoor air quality, thermal comfort, energy efficiency? Do we want that to be that tech sector that I just told you about? Or should it be us, those of us in this room, our ASHRAE members, who collectively have 125 years of experience creating the ground rules, the standards, the guidelines for things like indoor air quality, thermal comfort, energy efficiency. Another example, going back to the power sector, if they want to have access to building loads so that those loads can be managed in a way that will help improve the reliability and the resiliency of their side of the meter, they are going to need, and just like we're going to need, to have new protocols and guidelines and standards about how do our systems, how do building systems communicate and share information with the power systems on the other side of the meter. So do we want the power sector to create those protocols and those guidelines and those standards all by themselves? Or should it be us? Those of us that already know how to manage the systems that are required in order to create those healthy and productive and well environments for the occupants. It should be us. Again, we're the ones with 125 years of experience doing this sort of thing. This is why it is so important that we get engaged. We get engaged with the conversations, that we are part of finding those solutions, and that we start finding those right now. So ASHRAE has already started to become engaged in understanding where our strengths are already, where our gaps are, where we need to build our own capability, and where it makes the most sense for us to be working with others outside of the world that we're so used to being in. So crossing over that boundary of the building sector and finding out and building those relationships with others in the other sectors that have interest in our sector as well. So some of the things that we're doing, I'll be talking about it in the next couple slides here. One of them is to actually begin to form well-defined activities with some of these other organizations, either within the building sector where we feel that together we can address these issues more efficiently, or to expand outside of the building sector and begin to create those relationships with well-defined objectives for how we're going to address some of these issues moving forward. So what I'm showing you here on this slide and the next slide are some of those relationships that we have defined just in the last few months. One of the things that the board of directors is doing is working on identifying who those other organizations, in addition to the ones I listed here, should we be developing our relationships. And so by the end of the year, I hope to see this list much longer as we formalize those agreements through MOUs and partnership agreements. But to summarize a little bit of what's happening so far, ASPE, which is the American Society of Plumbing Engineers, ASHRAE and ASPE are working together to understand what piece of the energy-water nexus question should be addressed by the buildings industry, and how do we find answers to that. Now, the reason why this is important is because when fossil fuels are used to generate electricity, it requires a lot of water also. And as clean water is a dwindling resource on our planet, buildings being 75% of the consumer of all the power that's generated means that we have some responsibility to start to address the question about the energy-water nexus to figure out how can we decrease our industry's impact on this dwindling resource. So we've just started that effort with ASPE, and I'm excited to see what comes out of it as far as where our focus is going to be in addressing these questions. The next three are related to sustainable refrigeration systems and finding and learning how to use lower global warming potential refrigerants. So with IOR, the Institute of Refrigeration, that gives ASHRAE members access to a very, very vast library of resources related to refrigerants and refrigeration systems that we've not had access to in the past. So this is an area where we can help build our awareness and help build our engagement right away by having, being able to learn from what the Institute of Refrigeration has already developed and published. The other two activities on this screen are putting ASHRAE at the forefront on the global stage as being a leader in the refrigerants and refrigeration, sustainable refrigeration system space. And so it's helping to demonstrate that the work that we are doing in this area, which actually is quite impressive, we don't talk about it too much. It's getting that out there so that we're positioning ourselves to be leaders so that we have more opportunity to work with other organizations in addressing some of these challenges related to refrigerants and refrigeration systems. Now, why this is important is because it's been estimated by several different organizations that are telling us that it's anticipated that the number one single contributor to the increase in global climate temperature across the world is going to result from building air conditioning systems. The reason for this is twofold. You have the refrigerants themselves, and most of the refrigerants that we use have an impact on the health of our ozone layer, which is why we're looking for lower global warming potential alternatives. The other is because air conditioning systems use energy, and there's the impacts from the electricity that's needed in order to operate those systems, where that electricity is being generated and on down the line like that. So it's important for ASHRAE to focus in these areas as we address this new energy future. ASHRAE is also has created a new alliance with the Open ADR Alliance and the Smart Electric Power Alliance. That's what these first two bullets are here. We're working together with those two organizations to create that application guidance on smart grids that I told you about earlier. So this is the first time, especially with the Smart Electric Power Alliance, that ASHRAE has gone outside of our world into the power sector side and have worked together with an organization that represents the knowledge on the other side of the meter in order to coordinate and to share our expertise to create a product, which will be the application guide on smart grids. The last one I'll tell you about is about the International Facilities Management Association, or IFMA. We're doing several things with IFMA, but one of the things that I think is very exciting and that I'll tell you about tonight is we are working with IFMA to create an extensive training program for facility managers. So based on the knowledge that we have about how these systems should be working, because we designed them, we're installing them, we're the one that have the products and the expertise needed in order to fix them, these are the people that run them on the day-to-day basis. And so IFMA actually came to ASHRAE and they said, we need your help to help our members and the professionals in the industry that we serve be better able to operate these buildings, to manage these buildings, so that they continue to perform as they're supposed to. And by doing this, we will help to decrease the impact of buildings on the built environment. And there's some really cool stuff going on with that training effort right now. We're also doing a lot to engage with our students. Students have been a very important part of who ASHRAE is for the past, well, for as long as ASHRAE's existed, but for the past 25, 30 years, ASHRAE's really put extensive focus on ensuring that we are providing resources and creating valuable experiences for the student members of ASHRAE. We do that in a whole bunch of different ways, through the student branches and through student programs with competitions and creating communities where we help bring students together, especially at the winter conference every year. But one of the ways that I'll highlight right now is that we support students and by offering them scholarships and grants and grant programs to help them with their research, whether it's for undergraduate senior projects or for graduates programs or whatever it is that they might be working on. And last year, ASHRAE awarded just under $170,000 in student scholarships and grants. So this is really a way to help students become introduced to our industry, become introduced to ASHRAE, and begin to appreciate what it is that ASHRAE offers in order to help them have a community that will support them throughout their entire career. And anecdotally, several of the students that are recent or have been, who are recipients of these scholarships and grants or recently in the last few years have received them, when they come up to me and they tell me that they've received it, I'm like, congratulations, this is great, tell me about your work. And one of the things I consistently hear from them is they are so grateful for the opportunity to continue studying in their interest, but then to begin to focus it on the buildings industry because they were introduced to ASHRAE through their scholarship or through their grant. And now they feel like they want to give back. And so that is one way that ASHRAE is investing in the future by helping to drive students' interest in our industry, but also to help them become interested in being a part of our community, our ASHRAE community. We're also becoming engaged in the smart grid community. I told you a little bit about the application guides for smart grid and our partners for developing that application guide. But we're finding that by becoming more integrated with other building systems, with other energy consuming systems within buildings, is giving us, did I turn this off? How do I turn it back on? I can do this. I'm going to move back to this. That as building systems and other energy consuming devices within the building become integrated and we become a single energy consuming system within buildings, that the interconnectivity is offering us a lot of opportunities for how we manage loads in buildings and how those loads interact with the building systems. But it's also introducing vulnerabilities to cyber events that can occur through the building systems. Whether those cyber events are intentional or unintentional, just the fact that we are more interconnected through smart grid systems means that we could become more vulnerable to things that will be occurring. This is something we need to think about. We've never, as an organization, ASHRAE, have worried about that too much before. We have pieces of our industry that think about it. We have some manufacturers of equipment where they consider it and controls companies, but there's no consistent across the board. What do we do about that cybersecurity question? So ASHRAE has decided that if we are going to be leaders in this new energy future where we're very much integrated, not only across systems within buildings, but also with what's happening on the other side of the meter, that we need to also start thinking about building-specific cybersecurity issues. Because we want to make sure that the information about the systems in the building is kept secure, and most importantly, that we're protecting the information of the occupants within the building. So we're doing this primarily through a new technical committee that we've created. It's TC 210, which is called Resiliency and Security. We've asked this TC to do three things. We've asked them to, first of all, tell us what it is that we're doing within ASHRAE already that could support us in becoming more knowledgeable about building-specific cybersecurity issues. And then from that analysis, help us understand where do we need to build our expertise, where do we have those gaps that it makes sense for us as buildings professionals to become smarter. And if we know what those gaps are, then we can work within the structure of ASHRAE in order to create opportunities to increase our expertise in those areas. But another third very important thing we've asked them to do is to tell us who are those partners outside of the buildings industry with whom we should be working so that we can together find answers to building-specific cybersecurity issues. We recognize that as buildings engineers, we're not cyber experts. We're buildings experts. But because of our knowledge about the built environment, we know where there are vulnerabilities. We know what could happen if those vulnerabilities are compromised. And we need to make sure that those experts in the cyber world are familiar with these things so that together we can find solutions that both protect us, but also make it possible for us to continue to provide those safe and comfortable and healthy and well environments for the occupants. Another thing we're doing to become engaged is to participate and to position ourselves to be leaders in this global conversation that's occurring about the well environment, about creating well buildings and measuring the wellness of buildings. Those of you who may already be part of that conversation, I'm sure you realize that this is more than just a technical question. There are a lot of different professions and backgrounds of expertise that are involved with helping to define what is a well building.
Well, ASHRAE recognizes, going back to the fact that for 125 years, as an organization, we have been developing the understanding and the standards and the guidelines that define indoor air quality, thermal comfort, energy efficiency, and all of the aspects that are needed in order to achieve those things. And so we need to be part of that conversation. Oops, we have this one back. Thank you. We need to be part of that conversation. We need to share our expertise so that as this well movement turns into programs that could be a way to measure the wellness of the built environment or certify a building as a well building or whatever it grows up to be, that the technical expertise that we already have that is represented in that definition, that we know what is the conversation going, so we know how to evolve what we know already so that we can continue to be a relevant and technical knowledge and leader in the areas such as environmental quality, thermal comfort, energy efficiency, and the such. So we have created a multidisciplinary task group called Health and Wellness in the Built Environment. We've asked this MTG, Multidisciplinary Task Group, to do similar things as that TC that I just told you about. What is it that we're already doing in ASHRAE that we need to recognize are supportive of this conversation about health and wellness in the built environment? Where is it that we should be increasing our own knowledge and expertise so that we can continue to be leaders in these conversations as we anticipate this conversation will evolve? And thirdly, who should our partners be? That this is a multi-sector conversation that's going on. It's related to our new energy future. We want to know who are the most important partners that we should have as we position ourselves to be leaders in the wellness conversation. So these are some of the things that ASHRAE is doing to get engaged. I've told you about the TC, the MTG on health and wellness. I've told you about some of the reasons why we're doing these things. You can become engaged too. You can participate in those committees either as a corresponding member or attend their meetings if you go to the ASHRAE winter annual conferences. Get to know the other people in ASHRAE that are experts in this area and have conversations with them. But you can get engaged in other ways too. You could begin to think about some of these issues like smart grid questions or using distributed generation on their building site, or maybe having an opportunity to interact with a group of buildings, say in a neighborhood or in a district or a campus. So that you're sharing loads and sharing access to distributed generation, maybe incorporating some storage. Start thinking about how you can do these things in the work that you do now, so that you're ready when the first opportunity comes your way, that you can provide that expertise, or you're ready when your own stakeholders start to ask you questions. If someone comes to you and said, I want to be a provider of energy services, I heard it's a good thing, I don't know what it means, can you help me? And you, if you haven't given it any thought, are going to have to say, I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about. Or that person can come up to you and ask that question and you've been thinking about it, you've been becoming aware, you've been getting engaged in conversations, and then you can go back to them and be a resource. And you could be a leader, and suddenly you're somebody very valuable to them because you have more knowledge than they do, and you're helping them make good decisions. We need to become engaged. Another thing that you can do is you can start having conversations with your policymakers. Policymakers and regulators are those that have a lot of influence in how we design our buildings, how we operate our buildings, and the decisions we make, and the equipment that we select, the equipment that's being manufactured, what kind of efficiency targets are they achieving. All of this is impacted by policy and regulation. A lot of times those policymakers and regulators do not have a technical background, and they even less often have any expertise about buildings in the built environment. So they need us. They need us to help them build their awareness. They need us to help get engaged in conversations, to help guide them, so they can understand what's the impact going to be of some of the policy and regulations they're considering, or what kind of policy and regulations should they be putting in place in order to achieve the larger environmental goals that they're trying to achieve. They need us. This is how we can become engaged through that area as well. So think about how you can become engaged in addition to the tools and resources that ASHRAE is developing to help you do that. So ASHRAE is, you can stay engaged through the ASHRAE media, social media. There's a lot of activity going on Facebook and Twitter and all of the ASHRAE social media stuff. But I want to draw your attention to something that ASHRAE is doing to help position us to be seen as leaders in our industry. So this slide summarizes some of the work that's being done on our marketing side. These numbers are updated through the end of February, so they're pretty recent. 31 times in this society year, so between July 1st and the end of February, ASHRAE has been featured in industry publications outside of ASHRAE's own publications. So that means somebody else has written something that says, this is the great thing that ASHRAE is doing. ASHRAE is positioning us to move forward. So that's happened 31 times, which is actually a pretty big number. It's not as big as the numbers that are coming up next. Because of those 31 featured articles, there have been almost 9,500 media placements. What this means is about 9,500 times there has been a link published somewhere that comes out in a newsletter or a blog or whatever that says, ASHRAE is doing good stuff, click this link and read more about that. Now, because of those 9,500 media placements, that means that there have been more than 20 million media impressions. That means 20 million times somebody has clicked on those links, opened up the article, learned more about how ASHRAE is being a leader in our buildings industry and taking us into this new energy future. So this is what we're doing behind the scenes to help more than just us in this room and more than just us as ASHRAE members become engaged in this new energy future, but helping others outside of our ASHRAE world see ASHRAE as a true technical resource and inviting them to become engaged in this way as well. So this is pretty cool. I think 20 million is a pretty big number. So this white box here is supposed to be a photo of the ASHRAE 365 app. I'm not sure where my photo went. I'll have to re-put that back in there. But a quick blurb about the ASHRAE 365 app. This is a free app. It's a really easy way to stay connected to ASHRAE. If you put this on your device, it's a one-stop shop for accessing all things ASHRAE. So all the things that I've been talking about, like learning about when the Smart Grid Application Guide becomes available, or when those webinars are available, or the announcement about those videos, and all the things that I've been talking about, you can access that through this ASHRAE 365 app. So I wanted to put this up here to remind you about it. If you don't have it on your phone yet, you might consider downloading it. And everything I've talked about today, you can access it through that app. So I told you there are three things we need to do. We need to become aware, we need to get engaged, and we need to start now. So in the next few minutes, as I wrap up this presentation, I'm going to talk about what ASHRAE is doing to start now. One of the things that we're doing, oops, there it is, that's the slide I want. One of the things that we're doing is we partnered with an organization called APPA, A-P-P-A. APPA is an organization whose members are those that are responsible for the operations of large campus facilities. So usually the people in this organization have titles like Vice President of Facilities Management at University, fill in the blank. So these are people that not only have to make this campus work for all of the function, for whatever the function is, but they are responsible for managing the energy of those buildings on that campus. Now, the reason why we partnered with APPA is because we are finding that a lot of these things that I've been talking about tonight, about smart grid systems, microgrid systems, having special relationships with utilities that allow this campus to disconnect from the grid if there's a power outage somewhere else in the grid, so the campus can continue to operate whether they have power from the utility or not. Those types of things are already occurring at some of the more progressive campus environments. And we wanted to work with APPA to collect that information and to be able to share with not only our members but with the buildings industry the lessons learned. What works, what doesn't work, what approach was taken, what are some of the things that you would do differently if you could do it again. because we want to share this with all of you so that when you have an opportunity to begin to think about these things in your own work, you're not having to start from nothing. You have the experiences of somebody else. You see what they tried. You see what worked for them. You have a place to start. You know where this has been done, so instead of just being a theoretical question, you can say that at such and such university, this is the approach they took. And when you're thinking, I have an opportunity to do smart grid systems and buildings that worked over here, how did they do it? You'll have a sample. So we're working to collect that information right now in an effort we're calling a living laboratory activity. We've identified the first several universities that were pulling this information, and we're in the process of gathering that information and compiling it. So I anticipate that we will be able to publish the results of this first phase of our living laboratory activity by the end of this calendar year. So again, go to ASHRAE 365 app or whatever your favorite way of connecting with ASHRAE's information, and when it becomes available, I hope you find that this is a useful information for you. This is one of the ways that ASHRAE is starting now to help understand what works, create a tool that will help you start now when you can learn from these experiences from these campuses. ASHRAE is also starting now with its own building. So the picture you see here at the bottom, this is ASHRAE's headquarters building. It's located in Atlanta, Georgia. It's a building that ASHRAE has owned since 1981, and just about 15 years ago it went under an extensive renovation, which is why it looks like a modern building and not like a building from 1981. But ASHRAE's outgrown that building. So ASHRAE has a staff of about 124 people. And there's an education center along with that building. A lot of things happen in this building. And the building's no longer the right size for what ASHRAE needs. There's also a large development occurring around the building, and that developer was interested in acquiring that land to become part of the development. So the two lined up just right. And the board of directors said, now's a good time to sell this building. They sold it to the developer. ASHRAE no longer owns the building. They sold it November 1st. But part of the agreement was, as the developer said, ASHRAE, you can stay in this building till October 2020. So we're still using it, but we don't own it anymore. So what the board of directors said is, what are we going to do now? We could build a new building from scratch, and then we can have the experience of a new building, or we can do what most of our industry is dealing with on a day-to-day basis, and that's working with an existing building. So they said, we're going to walk the talk, we're going to do what most of our members are experiencing on a daily basis. We're going to get an existing building. And then they said, what are we going to do with that building? And the board was saying, well, we are moving into this new energy future. So we need to set the example and show our commitment that we believe that we can do the right thing, we can build our own experiences as we move forward in this future. And so they decided to make an existing building a zero energy building. Okay, this is a real project where we have an existing building, very aggressive energy goals to make it zero energy. We have a short timeline, October 2020. The new owner of this building wants ASHRAE out. I don't know yet if that means the wrecking ball comes on October 2020 or what they're going to do with it, but whatever it is, ASHRAE is no longer in that building, so ASHRAE needs a place to go. And there's a fixed budget. ASHRAE has the money they got from selling this building, and there's also a capital campaign going on right now to augment that budget so that we have a little bit more to work with, but it's a fixed budget. So it's a very real project. Aggressive goals, short timeline, and fixed budget. And ASHRAE is going to make this a zero energy building because they believe that's the right thing to do to help us move into this new energy future. And it wants to have experiences with its own headquarters project to be able to share with our members in our buildings industry. If you're interested in following the progress of this work, go to ashrae.org, new HQ. That means new headquarters. The information that's available up to this point in the process is available on that site. The design team has been selected. The first design charrette was held about 2 or 3 weeks ago. They're moving forward and figuring out how to make this new building or this new headquarters location, an existing building, make it into a zero energy building. Once it is completed, then ASHRAE will continue to publish through the website the performance information about this building so you can see how its zero energy building is actually operating. And finally, The last thing I want to tell you about how ASHRAE is starting now is the result of a relationship that ASHRAE's had with the International Code Council for many years. So ICC, one of their codes is the International Green Construction Code. And this is a code that lays out the requirements for having a very high-performing building. Starting in November of this past year, just about 4 or 5 months ago, the new IGCC that was released, as you can see at the top of the slide, is the International Green Construction Code, powered by Standard 189.1. ASHRAE Standard 189.1 is ASHRAE standard for high-performing green buildings. 100% of the new IGCC, of the content of that code, is ASHRAE Standard 189.1. This is the first time ever that a building code has been 100% an ASHRAE standard. And this is really important for a couple of reasons. It means that any building that's built to comply with the IGCC will be following Standard 189.1. It also means that whenever anybody is wanting to revise the IGCC, instead of going through the more conventional code revision process, all of those suggested revisions will be coming back to ASHRAE, and it will be considered as a revision to the standard. So that means ASHRAE members, the ASHRAE members who are on the committee and involved in the conversation for this standard, 189, are the ones that are making the decisions about future revisions to the IGCC. So this is a pretty cool way for ASHRAE to have a lot of influence on those high-performing green buildings moving forward. So ASHRAE recognizes that this new energy future is not that far away, that we are seeing these big changes that are occurring in the sectors around us. Those sectors are interacting with the building sectors like they've never had before. And we recognize that as leaders in the industry and as professionals in the work that we do, that we need to continue to take a leadership role and help all of us be prepared so that as a buildings industry, we are evolving with these changes as well. We don't want somebody to make changes for us. We want to be leaders in figuring out what does it mean to us and how do we evolve. So ASHRAE's been working very hard to understand what is it that we should be doing. That's the becoming aware part. Who should we be doing it with? That's the becoming engaged part. And what can we do right now so that we're providing the tools and the resources that's needed by the buildings industry and everybody in this room to help all of us move forward and to continue to be leaders within our own communities and with our own stakeholders. So now together, let's build that bridge to our new energy future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I pass to somebody for some questions, I think we have to point out that everybody needs to get engaged. So it's not something that it has to do with, let's say, mechanical engineers, because we have the impression that ASHRAE is about mechanical engineers only. We need everybody.
Exactly.
Okay. So thank you very much.